in South Africa, we've just enjoyed a long weekend. So while everybody returns to work, I'm glad to meet with you all online today and have a bit of a conversation about our journey that we've embarked on at Kumba Iron Ore with regards to digitalization of project controls. Most of us have had an experience where we start from a low base and have to work your way up. And ours haven't been much different from that, to be honest, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. So I'd like to skip ahead to that if I can. So today it's by no means an exhaustive list of action steps that you can go through yourself, but rather a conversation about our journey and why we've chosen to walk it. And thank you for your participation in allowing us to share our story. So a bit about our company. So Kumba Iron Ore is part of the Anglo American group. So currently we are producing iron ore as a South African operation. So we're situated in South Africa. So currently our growth projects department, which I'm the manager of project controls of, we handle projects in excess of $25 million US. They are typically large or complex projects, or they are split between smaller projects and more complex projects. And then also we've got other smaller projects, your stay in business type projects that we support on, which might be less than $25 million US, but nonetheless are also slightly complex in its execution. Our projects life cycles range from conceptual to execution and closeout, and we use our investment decision-making model to drive excellence in delivery through our project life cycles. Currently, our operations are focused in the Northern Cape with Kolomela and Sishen, the two bigger mines there, and supported by Saldanha and exploration throughout Africa. So what makes our projects department quite unique in terms of the company in itself is the fact that we've got multiple disciplines delivering projects, not necessarily different from other project delivery companies, but for a mining company, it's quite a large number of disciplines that have to achieve successful project delivery. And typically the function that I'm the manager of covers all the functional disciplines within controls, starting from project administration right through estimating, planning, cost management, dock control, risk management, change control specifically, and then also lastly project systems and reporting. So yeah, so by no means something different than you guys may have experienced in your working environments, but it's a bit about ourselves. So if I can dive in a bit, and I've had to discuss this with many people in the past as well. If we try and do things, eventually, hoping for different results. And I've seen many of us try the same thing, the same way, and we always expect different results. So you really, if you want something different to happen, we need to look at the way we make it happen. So from our side, having gone through this process before with others, I've tried to make from a team perspective, take a different approach to this. And I think this time we're a bit more successful than others in the journey. And I'll tell you a bit on that as we go along on why that is. So why did we choose to change? I think that's partly probably the most important reason why anybody would start a journey like this. If you don't have a strong why you need to do this, or why are we trying to do this, I think then from that perspective, you've got very little to fall back on when times get tough. So, and the reason for us, we decided to do that is basically to move from an undesired state to a desired state in our business. And I'll share a bit with you what are typical attributes that come to mind when you look at these states of being when it comes to project controls. And you might recognize some of them or associate yourselves with some of them. And feel free to share where you think you are. So on stage one, one tend to find a lot of isolated applications. People use a lot of office-based products. If there are systems, they are rarely used. Those that know how they are used normally have left the company or they've moved on. You intend to find quite a lot of data manipulation happening because of the applications that allow it. A lot of your procedures and policies are resource-centric. So in other words, they focus on a specific role, like the document controller should do X, Y, and Z. The procurement person must do X, Y, and Z. And that's where it stays. It's basically a resource-focused or resource-centric standard, which you find in most cases are outdated. So, the last time you've had an update on your standard was the last time your company did a mega project, which in some cases might be 10, 12 years back. Technology have moved on, people's skills have moved on. And you'll find that when you start introducing new technology or new ways of working, you encounter quite a high level of inertia within your immediate group or within your company specifically. So if that is you, I would like to encourage you and not give up hope, because there is light at the end of that tunnel, but just make sure your why is strong enough to take you through it. So where we started from a company perspective is slightly ahead of that, where we have defined responsibilities within our department and other departments. However, we still found resource-centric standards and procedures. A lot of our reporting was manually done, which in your case might be similar. You might find that there's multiple data sources, regardless of the fact that a lot of applications have been standardized throughout your company. So everybody uses X for this purpose. So that's typically the state of being that you are in. But at least at this point, you have a tactical advantage over the previous group in that sense. And where we find ourselves now at the start of 2021 as a company, we've taken or made the effort in the last 2-3 years to simplify our processes in terms of what we do within project management and project delivery. And then with that, we've automated transactional processing, automated reporting, and we've also managed to decentralize data capturing. However, we are capturing it into a single data source, and we'll get to that a bit later. What we did find as well is if we allow our standards to become process-centric instead of resource-centric, it alleviates quite a lot of bureaucracy, and it also simplifies processing. So a process or a standard is now not related to document control. A standard would say, this is how we purchase something. It's a process of sourcing, for instance, because the sourcing process involves many resources from different functions. And once you look at process-centric transactions, you can actually optimize quite a lot and save time and increase efficiency in that process. And by optimizing it, we found that we can deploy our solutions in a scalable manner so that we can deploy a solution that are robust enough to handle small and large projects, complex or easy projects. So it doesn't really matter what shape and size the project takes on, the solution is still scalable. Now, obviously, our desired state would be a more strategic one, where our project delivery staff and systems and standards are all engaged. It's like a system of gears working together. And in that state, it's also adaptable so that you can adapt to the requirements of every single project in itself, or as a portfolio in itself. And you want to move to a state where all your systems, processes, standards, and resources are dependable, and not just dependable on the resources, the people themselves, but as a framework system that all work in an integrated manner. And that's where the word integrated comes from, so that you don't just rely on the people themselves. So what we found on our side with a scalable solution is that you have the benefit of rapid deployment throughout your project domains. And we've certainly found that to aid quite a lot on our side. And that's quite a benefit to enjoy going forward. So what we're looking forward to on our side, that's still a work in progress, is the data mining and analytics portion of our solution, where we dive deeper into the data getting generated and getting not only process-centric data out of it, but also insights, which is something we can talk about at length at a different opportunity. So in embarking on this journey, we've been encountering quite a lot of inertia, and one of the things that I try and keep people reminded of is that you can't automate something that you don't understand. So for us, it was very important to understand what are we talking about, what are we trying to achieve, and why are we trying to achieve this? Because if you think that implementing software addresses your problem, it doesn't. It doesn't address your problem. It just makes you more efficient at it. You make mistakes faster and more accurately, if you want to call it that. But so don't think that implementing a software addresses your problem. So for us, it was very important to understand what are we trying to automate, and is automation, full automation, better than no automation or some automation? So which brings us to our philosophy. So how did we drive this process, and what was our philosophy when we started? And for me personally, it was cohesion. So there must be cohesion between three things when you want to digitalize your environment. The first of which is your standards and your systems. So we're talking about systems specifically today, but all three of these things, your systems, your standards, and your people, your culture, needs to be cohesive. And there should be a high level of cohesion between the three to be able to be efficient as a project delivery organization. And each of these contribute to specific things in your solution ultimately. So to make it practical, we coined the phrase the rule of one. And when we talk about culture, systems, or standards, we always talk about the rule of one, which means, in short, it's one source of truth. There should be only one source of truth. There should only be one place of entry. So if I need to capture a record of a transaction, there's only one place where I can go and capture it. And then the last one is the one-time entry. I only have to capture this information once, and it should be available throughout the entire ecosystem of solutions. So that makes for efficiency, and it also supports data integrity going forward. So rule of one, very important philosophy for us. One source of truth, one place entry, one time entry. And we've applied that throughout our solution. So what does our action plan then look like? So it's not rocket science in theory, but we've basically went ahead with a survey on our side to determine what do we have as a company, as an organization, in terms of people, systems, standards, etc. So what are those things that we do have, and what are the things that we needed, and determine from there what the gap was. And that can be a lengthy process in some organizations. For us, it took about 2 or 3 months to go through all of that, given that there were quite a lot of role players involved from different departments as well. So that took quite a bit of time on our side, but it was a worthwhile exercise to do, to determine what we have and what we needed, because that led to our next step, where we determined from the gap analysis who's available to assist us to fill this gap. You know, now that we know what the gap is, can we fill it, and who's the potential candidates that can help us fill this gap. And in the same process, through scoping, we also determined what gaps can we close ourselves. That's not necessarily a software-based solution, but rather a standards or a skill-based solution. So that was our second step. So from that step, obviously, we've determined who can assist and what we could do ourselves. And in that time, we then deployed our systems. And so when I say systems, it's a combination of software and standards, and people and processes. And we've also updated some of our standards, the key ones that we decided on first, the most important ones. And in the process, we've also tried to look at the taxonomy and user roles that we deploy within our project delivery organization. Taxonomy, as you know, is the type of language we use to describe the things that we talk about. And in most cases that I found previously, it's quite a large barrier in implementing any software solution in any company, because of the lack of a standardized taxonomy. We use different language to describe the same thing. And then people think they know what they mean, but they don't. And it creates miscommunication. So we worked quite hard on making sure that our standards are updated and our taxonomy and user roles are defined properly. So the next step on our side after that was rolling out and training the resources involved. Now, keep in mind that most of the users in this process was involved from the system landscape survey. So we've been building the case for change with them from the start. So for them, it wasn't a shock and horror when we introduced something. For them, they were much part of the process from the start. And I think from a change management perspective on the organization, that's a very important focus point and lesson learned, so that they understand why we need to change and they would like to change with you. A very important part. So obviously the outcome of this all led to our integrated dashboard reporting, and we'll talk a bit about what we use for what. And I'll show you a bit later how that looks like. But the real benefit of all of this in a project delivery environment, especially on large projects, is the real-time decision-making that can happen because you now have information at hand that's not that old and has been updated just by merely people doing what they need to do. As you know, in projects, a lot of times we don't have the time to do 100% of the analysis to get to the right answer. You at best have 50 to 80% of the information at hand at the point where this decision has to be made. And this has helped us a lot in making decisions faster, because the information is at hand faster and it's transparent and you can trust it. So, you know, the real benefit then is to make your decision making a lot faster and steering your projects the way you need to. So maybe if we talk a bit about functionality, you know, I've tried to document what we use, and I can briefly go through it with you. So from a scope and change management point of view, as well as risk management, we use SharePoint Online as our platform for that purpose. And I'm not going to go into the detail of how it would look like, but that's just to show you what we do and what we use it for. And from a quality and safety perspective, we use currently three systems on the project. We use Oracle Aconex field module, which assists quite well, being a field application, allowing guys with mobile devices in the field to gather real-time information with regards to quality and safety. Then from a company perspective as a whole, as also a part of the group, we use Isometrics and we use Passport 360. And the intent, and that's part of our phase 4, is to integrate with Isometrics and Passport 360 for live dashboarding capability. So we would have linked to Enablon, which is our legacy safety management system. And with the process of transitioning towards Isometrics, we've put that on hold until Isometrics has been fully loaded and rolled out. On the cost management side, we're happy to report that we use Oracle Aconex Connected Cost. It's very user-friendly. And for us, even guys that haven't used Aconex before, they could get up and running quite quickly. And with the schedule integration, which I think Alan and his colleagues will also talk about later, it makes our cost flow quite easy. I wouldn't say it's a walk in the park, but as you know, cost and schedule integration can be done, and we're doing it quite successfully. On the scheduling side, we use Oracle Primavera as our basis for scheduling. On the procurement side, we're using or intending to use the Aconex tender module just for the sourcing bit on projects, as the group has a different standard, but we have applied for a concession on that. Then on document management, you use the Oracle Aconex core modules, specifically the documents side of it, linked to tasks and mail, which also allows us to collaborate quite well with the Oracle Aconex mail module, which links to cost, by the way. So just through monitoring communication and looking at the registers that get created in mail from the different mail types, you can link to cost directly. You can raise your trends directly from mail. So for us, it integrates quite well, and we are kept up to date on what's going on the project, even through this time where not everybody can meet face to face. A lot of communication happens virtually, and this assists us quite, or it assists in us having to be on top of our game when it comes to cost management. So informal collaboration, we use Microsoft Teams on the project teams. And for process automation, to link between different software, we use Power Automate from Microsoft to link the different modules and to link it to Power BI as well, which is our next point. The data sourcing and modeling happens in Power BI to create a consolidated view of all these different modules and reporting, which is on then our last point, reports and dashboards. So I can show you a bit how that works a bit later. But I'll first try and show you how it would look like. So this is typically taken a few screenshots from our current dashboards that gets updated as the project progresses. So it's not a thing where you have to now go and update a specific graph or a specific dial. These dials gets updated as the project progresses. It refreshes every half an hour or every hour, and it links from the data source where the information gets captured by people doing their daily routine. So people capturing transactions or capturing high potential hazards, as they capture it, this dial will move, and it will always move based on what people do. The same would go for instance, procurement information, looking at how much people have paid on certain packages based on the commitments. Things that you would like to see up front, schedule progress, risks, it's all updated as you progress through the project and as people do what they need to do on a daily basis. From a controls perspective, we've basically given them a platform where they can put information down. So remembering the rule of one, there's only one place of entry. So if they needed to update status of procurement, for instance, they can only update this status in one place. There's only one place they can go to update it. So if information gets reported and it doesn't look right, there's only one place you will have to look for it to fix it. And there's nothing you can do on these reports to manipulate the data. You'll have to go and fix the source data. And in 99% of the time, it's information that wasn't updated. Typical things we use it for instance, on risk management, is to highlight our top 10 risks for each project. So each one will have a heat map like this and I'm not going to specifically state the top 10 risks here, but it shows you a summary of the top 10 risks. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to implement our integrated risk management approach throughout the group, because risks on projects could become a risk at a portfolio level, and it can then obviously be escalated to a business unit level. So from a project perspective, they can now propose that this risk, like for instance, on this project, the project has decided that risks number 1 and 3 should be escalated to business unit level. And by doing so, it becomes available on the portfolio risk register for the general managers or the portfolio managers to look at and to agree or disagree whether this is a business unit level risk or not. And when it is, it actually gets escalated to the business unit management or the ExCo in the quarterly risk reviews, so that they are immediately aware of a project level risk that could become a BU level risk. And in major projects, as you know, with the amount of money involved or the potential impact of a specific project on a business, that's quite a crucial thing to have, is that transparency from a business unit level down to a project level to see what the impact is. And we found it to be quite a significant game changer in our integrated risk management approach. So if I can share some lessons on our side. The first lesson that we've learned is that throughout the process, change management is driven by the why. So why are we changing? And I think if we didn't have the why, the change management wouldn't have been as successful as it turned out to be. We would have been met with a lot more resistance to change. And in some cases, you can say that, the global pandemic with COVID-19 did force us into a remote working scenario. But we've been working remotely about a year before lockdown occurred in South Africa. So the team members in our delivery group have already been used to working remotely because our system and standard and culture allowed for it. And it allowed for it because we all agreed on the why and why it was important, and we all bought into that. So the second lesson we learned is that when you look at solutions or platforms, look at solutions or platforms that are OS and device agnostic. What you need is you actually want to have an internet-enabled device, and that should be enough to be able to access your platform. So from a strategic point of view, we've tried to move away from what we call an on-premises solution, because that limits you in terms of who can access and what can be accessed and with what you can access it. So preferably you would like a solution that's OS and device agnostic. So from a standards and culture perspective, we've spent quite a lot of time and effort with our local small and medium enterprises on the ground. to support them and to communicate the case for change, the why, to them as well, so that they understand the need for digitization, and how it will benefit them in the long run, because we would like to work with them as part of our supplier development process, to also make sure that they are doing business the way we would like them to engage with us as a company. And we've already seen the fruit of that coming through on some of our projects. So that's definitely a lesson learned, that you should not forget your downstream contractors in a process like this. It might be easier for your company to adopt a platform, but it might not be that easy for local small or medium enterprises to adopt in the same level. So part of our success, I would say, would be the culture of collaboration and innovation that was cultivated about a year before lockdown was introduced in South Africa. So it forced us to change our thinking from, this is not my job, to how can I help? Where in the past, and I think in isolated applications we talked about with the basic maturity is, if it's not in your job description, people tend not to help you. And I think our culture had shifted before that into a how can I help scenario. It is a bit dependent on the management culture, and because in our case the management culture is a culture of how can I help you, what is hindering you, can I make the hindrance disappear. It obviously flowed from there into a collaborative culture. A lot of people initially were scared of new technology, so they were scared to use like Teams, for instance. They were scared to use OneDrive. They were scared to use Aconex because it's something they were not used to. But the culture of collaboration assisted them to overcome that barrier, in the sense that they have now found, oh, okay, Aconex is not that difficult. It's actually quite clear. So they embarked on that journey with us quite easier and more voluntary than one would have expected. What we did, though, and thinking about automating something you don't understand, is that before we embarked on the whole process, as part of our system landscape, we try to understand the business processes behind what we do as a project delivery group. And I think, trying to automate something you don't understand will just create more problems than it solves. And we've made an effort to make systems work for us in terms of how we understand our business process and what platform limitations introduce risk to our current business process, and would it be worthwhile looking at simplifying or changing the business process without sacrificing governance to be able to suit. Which brings to the last point, is to understand your key control points in each business process. A lot of times we've introduced hold points or control points within a system or process because of legacy transgressions, without understanding why certain governance was put in place. It could have been due to one or two people breaking the rules, making everybody down the line having to suffer increased governance. But if you understand the context in which the rules were broken, and understanding that those scenarios and context doesn't exist anymore, you can basically zoom in on the key control points for any process and then make it simple enough so that your platform limitations don't limit you, and it actually helps you. So, the mantra on software is always to keep it simple. And on our side, we didn't try and change the software. We would rather change the process we work through, understand the process and see how we can simplify it. So that's basically our lessons learned. So as I've spoken, you guys have probably noted down a few questions, or you've noted down certain other lessons that you have learned from similar journeys, which we can share a bit later. Before we do, and with Anel's permission, we wanted you guys to have a look at a quick poll, 2 questions. So at this point, I'd like to invite you to visit www.menti.com and use that participant code to quickly do a questionnaire. It's not long, it's 2 questions, but it gives you a sense of things to look at when embarking on a process like this.
Hi, Deon, I've added the link in the chat if somebody wants to go to chat and just click on the
Brilliant.
link. It will make it a little bit easier and faster.
Thanks. So let me put the results on it. So long. So question 1. Which controls discipline do you as an audience feel gets the least attention when we deploy software systems? I'm going to let it run for about a minute or so.
Deon, we had a number of requests for your contact details. Am I right in saying people can find you on LinkedIn?
That's correct.
Deon Stassen on LinkedIn. You will see that he works for Anglo American, and you can send him a direct message on LinkedIn. I think that would be the easiest.
Yes. So currently we've got 31 responses. I think we're 78 participants. So we're about a third, almost a third through the audience. And it's interesting to see the answers already. So from all the disciplines, risk management gets the least attention, then change management, then reporting, estimating. It's interesting. One almost feels that most software is sold on the reporting component. Look at all these fancy reports, and they don't really look at the underlying disciplines that are covered. Or they think that there are standardized software for those. There's a lot of, opinions on why it is like that. But I've sort of expected the answers that's currently on the screen. It's certainly one of the questions we've also asked ourselves when we looked at the current, or when we looked at our system landscape. What do we have available? What do we need? And it wasn't very much different from what's on the screen. It's interesting. So I'll give it another minute or so. I see we've got 76 participants, 47 have answered already. I think once we hit the 55 participant mark on the poll, we can move on. Okay, currently it's not moving. So I think let's move on to the next one. So the next question, if you think about project control solutions, I've tried to jot down 4 attributes, which we encountered and debated quite a few times about. And I would like to hear from you guys in the audience, how important are these attributes to you? On a scale of 1 to 10, being low importance is a 1 and high importance is a 10. Because these things came to mind when we were looking at our system landscape and potential solutions.
While we're waiting for some responses there, sorry to jump in, Deon. If you guys have questions for Deon so long, you can send it on the Q&A or on the chat. And then afterwards, we'll ask Deon to go through them and answer them.
Okay. So what's interesting for me, and I sort of predicted that lifecycle costing would become less important as technology advances, where most emphasis is placed on the speed of implementation, the level of customization, and the ease of use over and above change management in the organization and lifecycle cost to the organization. So the trend is moving. And from our side, on the level 4 maturity curve that we introduced earlier, rapid deployment and engaged workforce links to 2 of these already, or 3 of them: speed of implementation and ease of use. In most cases, the easier the solution is, the quicker the adoption as well. I think our results have now settled. So that's a very interesting trend. I'll run it for another 30 seconds or so. I think we can open the floor for some questions.
Yeah, Deon, I see there's a number of questions in the Q&A. If you click on the Q&A, you'll see Terence has asked a number of interesting questions, as well as Frans van der Walt. So some of them, if you can pick a couple of them to answer live, and then maybe answer the rest in type while we're busy with the next session. Okay,
we can do that. I think one that comes up, I'm just going to screen through most of them. Why did we choose Iconex? Did you give access? Well, there was 2 things on the first question. So I can't divulge who the other participants were, but the Iconex, the Oracle Iconex solution, in terms of our scoring criteria, came out the best solution. And it was predominantly due to ease of implementation and speed of implementation was one of the key criteria. Another key criteria was obviously life cycle cost from a commercial perspective. Also, how many disciplines can we cover with the solution? You know, if it's just a one-based discipline, or dedicated for just cost management or just planning, you know, you want to capture as many disciplines as you can with one platform. So that's one. Did I give contractors access? Yes, so they collaborate with us on the platforms, both in the Teams environment as well as in Oracle Aconex. So which process full integration? So currently we've got document control integration, full mail collaboration between parties, which includes commercial administration in the form of early warnings, risk mitigation meetings, etc. Other integration that's possible that is yet to have rolled out to our smaller and medium contractors would be what we call downstream contract sharing, where people can submit progress claims online via Aconex. So that's something we would look at further down the line. Our current level of maturity on the contractor side is not there yet to be able to facilitate that, but on the document management and review side, the mail collaboration side, they are fully engaged. Let me see. I have workflow for approval in DOA. Aconex have workflow for approval based on a delegation of authority. We've set up templates and roles. So all the roles in the DOA is defined upfront by the project or the steering committee for that project. And our workflows are set up accordingly. So regardless of who is in that specific role, a given delegation at that point, we've set up templates. So for instance, a typical example of workflows could be invoice approvals or approvals for contracts. A typical invoice approval will have thresholds where invoices less than $1 million would go to certain people, between 1 and 10 million would go to certain people, etc. And we set up those workflows up front as a template with those roles that need to approve. And the person doing or creating the specific workflow at that point basically just selects, okay, the template based on the invoice value. So a DAF approval for invoice less than 1 million, say select it and it's done. It's all role-based. Packages we use for risk register. That's basically SharePoint, as I stated earlier in the presentation. So our risk register is maintained in SharePoint and all the reporting is done from there. Integration with SAP is still pending because there was changes that we were making in the SAP environment. So that's still pending. At this moment in time, the cost management leads SAP in most cases because the project know which invoices have been collected and approved before SAP does. So SAP is a lagging system, but because it's our cost control side of things, it also is involved in our processes. Does cost management workflow approval integrate into financial management? Yes, through workflow. So transactions cannot occur without workflow. So we incorporate workflow templates quite a lot and significantly so for most of our transaction-based and also in our engineering and design space, quite significantly so.
Thank you, Deon. There's a question from Hendrik on the chat. He asked, did you manage the project yourself or did you involve one or more of the Big Four management consultants?
So on our side, it was basically myself and a few other team members within our department. We were assisted in rolling out Oracle Aconex in the form of almost a consulting basis, because on our side, you know, we were given the opportunity to engage with Alan and his team up front to see how Aconex cost, for instance, look like. What are typical things you can do with it? We've explored the functionality with the Oracle team. So in most cases, we knew what we had to do from our side. So in that sense, it enhanced our deployment speed. So they were able to assist and willing to assist. Whether we made use of that, that was up to my team. So it was basically driven from our side and not from a consultant side, if that was the question.
I think so. Any other questions? You ran through all of the questions very quickly, Deon. I think if there's any, Hendrik says yes. One more question from Terence, and then I think any other questions, Deon, if you can answer it while the other presentation continues.
Yeah, we can do that. So the last question I see here is, was there a focus on earned value in the system? To be honest, the earned value portion of it is sort of an outflow of the way we do things there. And so because you have cost time integration, it's quite easy to do a performance measurement baseline. And therefore, things like SPI and CPI gets calculated through the system. So the focus was not earned value, but the earned value portion of it is the outflow of good cost time integration. It all starts with your taxonomy, your integrated work breakdown structure, the way you've defined your procurement packages, engaging your supply chain, etc. So to what level is we control currently some of our projects, or most of our projects, we actually control on a package basis. And because we have an integrated work breakdown structure and cost time integration on a package level, earned value is very easy to do. So for us, it wasn't a focus. It's more of an outflow of having the right basics in place.
Thank you, Deon. I think we gonna leave it at that. It was a very interesting presentation. I think all of us know change management or change is needed, but it's a huge dragon, and it's sometimes very scary.
Yeah.
I made it sound like a lot easier than it was. But
for sure.
it was definitely an interesting approach. Just